Okay, so we're going to get started shortly. Can I ask our clinicians and patient representatives to come to the front, please? You're asking questions. Okay, so for our final session of the day, we've invited a selection of patients and clinicians to take part in a panel discussion and share their experiences, which Emily will host. And hopefully there will be time for questions, and Alex, Emily and Alex will host. And hopefully there'll be time for questions afterwards, so do jot down any ideas or any issues you want to raise for the end. Emily and Alex.
So nice to finally have Alex up on the stage. I know she hates it, but come and stand here. So this is really your session to ask this incredible panel of incredible people anything you want to know about Duchenne. So I'm hoping that there are going to be lots of questions. So please put your hand up.
I tell you what, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, that's a good idea. Yes. Sorry. Oh, careful with my teeth.
Hi, is that working? Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Emma Hallam, and the best job I've got in the world is I've got a son called Alex, who is shortly going to be 18 years old. He has got Duchenne. So I've been in this community for a very long time. My son has taken part in 2 clinical trials over, since he was the age of 8. So literally 10 years of taking part in clinical trials. He's currently on the Juvenistat clinical trial. So I'm a family member that knows a lot about Duchenne and clinical trials, as well as also the founder of a charity called Alex's Wish that's been mentioned. And we're massive collaborators of Duchenne UK. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Francesco Montoni. I'm the one who introduced scrambling of the alphabetical order that I'm pleased to hear has been now adopted in this group of colleagues as well. But
hi, my name is Lisa Kuwald. I have a son, Felix, who is 13 with Duchenne. We have a friends and family fund with Duchenne UK called Team Felix. Felix has been on a trial as well since he was about 7 or 8. So that's been going on for quite a few years.
Hi there, I'm John Burke, a cardiologist working in Newcastle, and I've been involved in looking after the hearts of boys with DMD for getting on for 20 years now.
And I'm Michela Guglieri, consultant neurologist in Newcastle.
And Volker Schraub, also consultant neuromuscular geneticist in Newcastle.
Hello, my name is Rory Kwan. I'm a consultant child psychiatrist, and I'm very interested in the body-mind connections, and that's how I ended up in this project.
Thank you. Right, so who would like to ask one of our panelists a question? Yeah, why don't you ask Alex?
Oh, John Devlin does, but I'll...
There's the thing.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just, it's vamorolone related. I was interested to know, are we looking at, or do people believe that there will be, if funding is given and granted, will it be across the spectrum, or will it be selective? I wasn't quite sure from one of the comments earlier. And if it is selective, what's plan B?
So the reality is that at this stage, we do not really know. So if you look in the regulatory approval, both EMA, FDA, and MHRA, is only from children age 4 and above, and there is no other clear criteria. So there is no limitation in terms of the ambulatory status, there is no limitation in terms of age. Now, the reality is that the license in the UK will be defined by NICE, and we are waiting for the decision from NICE in May. And going through this process, NICE can decide to follow what the MHRA said, 4 and above, no limit, or can decide to put any limit or any criteria in terms of starting or in terms of stopping. So at this stage, we realistically, we do not know. There is another consideration that is about what also family and clinician feel comfortable with. So whatever, even if we have a 4 and above, then we need to think about pro and cons of changing, for example, someone that has been on traditional corticosteroid for 10, 15, 20 years. What is the real benefit risk in changing to vamorolone? What do we know about? So there is one thing that will be dictated by the license and one that will be dictated by what do we know and what is the best interest of the individual person. The other point is that there is an ongoing clinical trial in both younger children between the age of 2 and 6, and that is predominantly on safety, and another clinical trial in children and young adults between the age of 7 and 18. And in the higher age cohort, there are some that were steroid naive and other that were switched between prednisone, Reflazac, or to vamorolone. So we will learn from that, and this could potentially then provide further information to the regulator to make differences in the license if needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Just on the vamorolone, again, Ray, it's being reviewed by NICE at the moment, and somebody asked me in the break, how long will that process take? And I think even with everything we've done with Project Hercules, you know, the road ahead is still really tough. And we've seen in SMA, for instance, they had a gene therapy drug for type 1 that was very effective, but it still took the company a long time to negotiate with NICE. So it's going to be a challenging road ahead. We're obviously trying to help wherever we can. But I don't, you know, we want to give you hope, but we also want you to be realistic. And you know, it's not going to be tomorrow for a reimbursement decision for vamorolone. But we obviously at Duchenne UK will keep you updated on all the discussions as they unfold.
And one thing that I think that is important, we'll try also to keep the communication as open and as informative as we can, because I think that we all need to learn, and depending on also what NICE we release, I guess that more question will come out, and the only thing that we can do is try to explain the process.
I think Kerry's got a question. Hi there. It's great to see we've got a few more clinical trials coming through for the non-ambulatory, especially the recent one that's been published about the Givinostat. My question really is where we have these, and they advertised up to the age of 18 or 17 for recruitment. Realistically, our children's paediatrics can't support that past the age of 14, 15 because the longevity of the trials. So my question is, how do we move forward from this? How do we educate the sponsors that more adult sites need to be on these or enrolled onto these clinical trial sites? And how do we give our boys that opportunity where they are now slowly, you know, the progression is slowing down and living longer, rather than just feeling that they're getting written off and abandoned?
Maybe start to reply to this. I feel and fully understand, and it's true that for many, many years, most of the clinical trials were focused on pediatrics, and there we focus all our energy and effort. And I agree that it's definitely, we thought for a long time to try to develop the same model that we've done for the DMD hub, so to train clinical trial sites in delivering pediatric clinical trial also into adult. But it's very difficult when there are no clinical trial in adults. So you prepare in a way a field without having anything to offer. And therefore it's very difficult for sites to engage on the theory. I will be able to deliver a clinical trial, but actually I do not have any clinical trial. And that is one of the reasons why we are a little bit behind in terms. Now we have more clinical trial, not necessarily focus on the adult population, but focus on the older pediatric population. And how do we prepare? And this is the right time to really work and engage with the adult network to say we need to be ready. For that perspective, there are things that have happened. There have been the adult North Star network, that is the clinical network, so not clinical trial, that has been up and running now for a few years, is not as historically established as the pediatric network, but is coming up, and I think that is a good resource. And we have just announced on the 29th of February, so it's a few days ago, in collaboration again with Duchenne UK, to establish what we call is the BMD hub, that is the Becker muscular dystrophy hub, but with a very strong link. Becker muscular dystrophy, we have the first clinical trial in Becker muscular dystrophy, which involve adults, and we feel that this is really the great opportunity to combine, in a way, the Becker muscular dystrophy with the Duchenne muscular dystrophy to develop the BMD, DMD adult hub, and this will hopefully help both the transition of the patients that are currently in pediatric to move to adult, but also to make the UK as an attractive place to conduct adult clinical trial. Takes time, it doesn't address the individual now, but the fact that the conversation is starting now, hopefully we will not take long to engage. And we have the first few clinical trials in Becker muscular dystrophy running, so there are a few sites that are already ready to deliver.
Could you pass the mic to Francesca?
So one thing that perhaps the advocacy group potentially could do, I'll give you a reflection on my own situation. So I work at Institute of Child Health. We cannot see people with any condition after the age of 18 or 17 and whatever. And we have a good working relationship with the adult team at the Institute of Neurology. However, when a sponsor comes, that comes back to the question of the lady, they need to engage two different sponsors. Now, this is happening, but of course it took an enormous amount of time to start with, because you need to align, firstly, internally, these two different institutions, because that is the first time they are facing this. Now, hopefully the next time will take less time. The first time took a lot of time, a lot of pressure. So maybe the DMD hub and possibly the advocacy group works sometimes better from the advocacy group. They should really start asking the individual pediatric hospital that do have arrangement with adults how they are ready for this. Because if I was a sponsor and I had two sites, and Michaela is already has been through that path, and Volker has not been through that path, I will go to Michaela, because that I will save 6 months of a negotiation. So that may be time that could be saved.
We're just actually setting the priorities for the hub in the next 3 years, and this is actually an area that we have set as one of the priorities we're going to address. I've got a question for John, actually, and quite a lot of parents have come up to me over the course of the conference, and obviously the cardiac guideline says to start heart medication before the age of 10. A lot of parents have come up to me with 5, 6-year-olds wanting to know if it's okay to start heart medication even earlier than the recommendation.
Yeah, that's an important point. Typically, well, the first thing to understand is that these heart medications are usually very well tolerated. They don't have significant adverse effects apart from having to check for blood pressure and other things when they're started on them and when you're up titrating the dose. The International Care Standards documents gave a lot of wiggle room for when to start this, and that's why they ended up with this rather vague phrase that said no later than 10. And that's because most times you begin to see weakness of heart muscle pumping that's detectable by echo by around age 13. And the idea was to get ahead of that. But we have used these treatments as young as boys of just over the age of 5. And we're not aware of any downsides from using these treatments. And of course, because the age of onset and detection of the underlying processes is quite variable between boys, you don't actually know in an individual boy when they would actually have begun to manifest, let's say, what might be obvious only on an MRI scan. Now, it's not that you need an MRI scan, but for example, starting medication at 6 or 7 in one boy would actually be perfect, in the sense that if you had an MRI scan result, you'd be showing heart effects already that weren't obvious on an echo. Whereas in another boy, it could be that by age 9 or even 11, the same changes hadn't happened. So if you're basing your decision-making on echo alone, and we're talking now about quite sensitive echo, not crude echo, then you actually want to be ahead of deterioration. But the age is not critical, and obviously families will think differently about that. So some will want treatment started very early, Others will only be happy with one medication started early, and then the others built on at various thresholds depending on the results that are following. Others will want all 3 treatments that we spoke about the other day started as early as perhaps even pressing the boundaries with your cardiologist. So it's a discussion rather than a done deal or you must do this.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry. Just relating from that, and I know lots of children are on perindopril and it can move through from 2 milligrams to 4 milligrams. Is there scope to go further, or is it just then you would start to add something else in, you know, like bisoprolol or plyronone or...
Well, in pediatric practice, the doses are worked out on weight. And for example, in the trial that we ran looking at perindopril, and by the way, all the ACE inhibitors, that's a family of drugs, probably all have the same benefit. So we just picked perindopril because it's a once-a-day treatment. The dose in the under 30 kilogram people, we opted for a 2 milligram dose of perindopril, equivalent for any of the other ACE inhibitors. The dose will be slightly different depending on the drug. And over 30 kilograms, we said 4 milligrams. In an adult, the top dose is 8 milligrams. But of course, children are not adults. So it's a question of following, you know, as somebody moves into adulthood and as their weight goes up, you probably will want to escalate the dose further. But essentially, the medicines, the beta blocker, the ACE inhibitor, the mineralocorticoid, that's the eplerenone, spironolactone, they act in different ways. So it's not one replacing the other. They're doing slightly different things to bolster the overall effect.
Can I ask a question to Rory about mental health care? I know quite a few boys who've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder around about the age of 12 or 13. And I'm wondering whether we as a medical community assume that boys who are going into puberty, potentially losing ambulation, getting more anxiety, may most likely have generalized anxiety disorder, and we can give them fluoxetine to save them having to wait 2.5 years for a referral to CAMS? And how is the psychosocial working group going to provide guidance going forward so that neuromuscular clinics can address this challenge?
Good. There's a few questions there. So I think the first is about how do we distinguish what I might regard as mental health pathology versus what might be expected and appropriate in a child of that age going through that. And I'd base it on the level of impairment and distress. So an anxious child who's still managing to go to school and being with their friends and doing a bit of work and stuff is probably not going to justify a psychotropic medication, and regardless, probably the recommendation is going to be first to have talking therapies. Now, I know what everyone is thinking and how hard those are to access. We're going to hopefully work on that. It might be that we take a slightly more pragmatic approach when we publish the psychosocial guidelines, in that the nice advice for anxiety is talking therapies first and medication if those aren't helping. But the reality is lots of the lads are probably not candidates for talking therapy because they don't want it. They're not very adept at recognizing their own thoughts and feelings, so CBT is a sort of non-starter. So I think, and especially talking to Volker earlier, sort of, well, let's crack on and give it a go spirit. We might be saying there's justifiable reason to start an SSRI earlier on in the course of things, and there's been a couple of patients that I have done that with. What was your third question?
How soon will it be when will we have guidance on this? Was that the third question?
I don't know. Does anyone remember what the third question was? Can I be a bit cheeky and just do a very rough survey with hands up? So, because we don't know how many people are on psychotropic medication. So if you have a child with Duchenne or you care for someone with Duchenne, can you put your hand up? That's obviously loads of people. And then keep your hand up if your child or person you care for takes melatonin, and drop it if they don't. So maybe about a fifth or third of fifth. Okay. Put up your hand if your child takes an SSRI, so an anti-anxiety medication. Very, very few, really. What about methylphenidate for ADHD? 1. So this is really helpful. I mean, we definitely need a bit more evidence of kind of survey-wise, but the numbers would suggest we need to increase those.
A further question on hand polling. How many people in this room feel that their child would benefit from some sort of intervention or medication to help them with things like ADHD? I know that's a general question, but is there the sense that people can't get access?
I don't know if it's about medication. I think it's just about I'm not sure it's about medication. I think it's about access to some kind of help, because at the moment, I mean, we're very fortunate, but I have heard stories over the last couple of days of parents with their children who are struggling with the changes that are happening to their body, trying to understand why it's happened to them, dealing with being different at school, from height-wise to body composition to educational ability, but why them? And yet there's no one they can really talk to, understands it, who can, Rory can't speak to, and his team can't speak to everybody. And where do we go? Where do we get this help from? We're fortunate. We are able to access through a direct referral from our neurology team, which is unheard of, but we are one in a few. So I don't know, and I think that maybe leads up to the question that Emily asked, was when do we get the guidance to say these boys need to be, as you were saying in your talk yesterday, Rory, they need to be assessed at diagnosis for what are their needs, and then followed through, because from a clinical perspective, the standards of care are now, with Alex's project, which has been amazing, has really elevated the standards of care. It's gold standard, it's international gold standard, the UK standards of care. But we are missing one big piece.
So I would suggest that prior to the guidance being published in all their glory, there's a stepwise process where we might even do a one-sider that translates the problems that your lads have into understandable CAMS language, and effectively says rare condition does not equal rare specific treatment required. And that's the kind of thing that GPs can then attach to their CAMS referral and try and get a move on. Because not only can I not see all of your lads, it's not appropriate because it sets up some fantasy that only I and my colleagues can do it.
I've got another question, sorry. Whilst I have the microphone. To our amazing mums on the stage, both of you experiencing clinical trials with your boys. Top 3 things to look out for regarding a clinical trial as far as difficulty, burden, outcomes, what's good, what's bad? Either of you, I don't mind.
What's good? Well, I think what was good for us is just that feeling that you are being constantly monitored and having that extra support. And then when anything ever happened at home, it was just straight, you can just ring straight away. And that for me was a really, really positive thing, definitely. From Felix's point of view, I would say the positive thing was that he gets a day off from school every week. And he would have a trial every day of the week if he could, honestly. Yes, definitely. Yeah, not at the weekend. So I do think that support that you get from being with that specialist centre is been really, really important. And I wouldn't say it's been a negative thing because he has embraced it so well. So for us, it has been quite positive, and it's time I've spent with him and things like that, which has also been important. So it's been a good experience.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Lisa's just said. We did a clinical trial with Alex, my son, on Pfizer, actually, with Michaela, Dr. Michaela Guglieri, who knows Alex very well, at Newcastle for about 3.5 years. And it was a monthly infusion. So we had to stay up overnight, which meant train, pizza, cinema, bowling. So from that regard, he loved going to Newcastle. The team at Newcastle are phenomenal. So it felt for him like he was really supported. He had like another family around him that he could ask questions. I, as a parent, felt super supported. That, monthly I had a touch point to say, I've got this issue or I've got this worry, and it just meant I had that regular touch point. So from that regards, it was tick, tick, tick on everything. One of the downside of things was that trial didn't work, and it was delivering the news to Alex that I'm really sorry, but you're not going to go back to Newcastle. And in fact, for him, he was more upset that he wasn't going to see the team at Newcastle than he was about the drug not working. But the great news was we then got on Givinostat. So it all worked out, and Alex is still on the Givinostat trial. He's on an extension trial. He still goes up to Newcastle every 3 months now. He's nearly 18, so like he doesn't really like spending time with me as much now. So, but nonetheless, he likes a day off school. He's doing his A-levels. But yeah, it's all been super positive. And I think from a family's perspective, not just only us and not only Alex, but grandparents, it's felt like there's hope. We're on a trial. It could potentially be working. We're doing everything we can as a family. We're helping to potentially bring new treatments for others and potentially Alex. So was there anything bad about it? I really don't think there has, and I would highly recommend to all families to seriously consider going on a trial because it is so super rewarding. The only thing he doesn't like about Givinostat is he said it's disgusting, and why does it taste so vile? He has to have it twice a day, and he literally says, why do they make it taste so bad? But bar that, honestly, I just haven't got anything bad to say.
To the ladies again, really, what's the impact been on, with clinical trials, like on the immediate family? Like our son, we've got another son who doesn't have Duchenne. Has there been any impact on them, on you going away lots, and just generally the impact it's had on any siblings in the family? He does suffer quite a lot himself with anxiety, very emotional child anyway. For us to go away, start a trial with him and even more focus on him again. How do you manage that, and how does that work?
I'm not miffed that no one asked me a question, but I have to catch a train, and that's just what I want to say. I have to leave.
To say that at the start. Rory, would you mind moving up one, and then we can get rid of the chair?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I have 4 boys, and Felix has a twin brother who doesn't have Duchenne. So it's a real direct comparison of how that affects him. And I wouldn't say it affects him in a negative way. It all comes down to, well, you've got a day off school and I haven't. And honestly, it's not, apart from that, really, it hasn't been anything else. And to be fair, I have taken him with me sometimes. If we've gone and stayed overnight, I've said, right, well, you can come as well. And I've let it be a little thing that we've done together. But in terms of just being at home and, how that's reacted, then it's not been. But yeah, I have taken him with me, and my other 2 are older anyway, so I've been able to separate that. But I'd understand probably if you had a few of the same age, it might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, for me, Alex is nearly 18. I've got my daughter Isla, who's 11, and she's occasionally during school holidays come to the trials with me. Loves it, loves the train, loves the fact that she gets treated to something nice, gets sweets on the way. So from that regard, like Isla loves coming to Newcastle. In fact, it's when she's at school, she's like, oh, it's not fair. Alex gets, a day off, goes to Newcastle, and I can't. But again, me and my husband have never done it together. In fact, I think he's only ever been to one clinical trial appointment. I've done every single one. So it's my time with Alex, and Dad's at home with my other daughter. So from that regard, as a family, I'm very fortunate that running the charity, I haven't got a boss that's telling me, you can't have a day off. And that's why I decided to do what I do. I'm very fortunate in that regard that time off is not an issue, and Alex always comes first in everything. So yeah, for me, not a problem. In fact, actually, Isla's the one that reminds Alex to take the medicine. Alex, take your medicine. So yeah, she's actually part of the family. She's well involved in it, and it's in fact, I think it's been a really educational piece for Isla as well. That her brother's on trials, and she understands the medical side of it, which has been really good.
I'm always the negative one, as Emma always tells me. But I think that I want to point it out, and I don't know if you remember. One, it can be tricky, and I have a few family where with siblings, sometimes the psychological aspect has always been overall managed, and the discussion I always keep it open to say, ask the clinician if you can adapt and say, all family comes once, and usually we have some flexibility within a trial to accommodate the family requirement for make sure to maintain the balance. But sometimes people are full-time work and they need to ask time off, and therefore it's very difficult. Again, it's important to work with the site to say if there is a day of the week that work better, is there any compromise? And that cannot always be done, but at least that discussion can be open. And another thing, because there are a few companies here that I want to mention, is that point to say when family is not a point to travel, just the child and the mom or dad. Sometimes you need 4 people to travel. But in the effort of the trial is what is work. And I have a few issues, and I can't remember if it was you, because when you need a childcare for the second one, because it's too little to travel and is not normally nursery that day, and become quite an expensive situation for some family, and not everybody can manage. And I know that a lot of family manage because they don't see any other option, but there are things that need to be raised because sometimes can be addressed, sometimes cannot be addressed, but it's an issue sometimes in terms of everybody say, oh, but everything is reimbursed. No, everything is not reimbursed because the time of work and the adjustment of everyone else in the family is not always reimbursed.
There's a massive financial burden with taking part in clinical trials, and yes, you're not meant to bribe your child to take part, but they've just given bloods, they've just done all these tests they don't want to do. You've got to buy them a set of Lego, you've got to buy a magazine. You know, you do have to incentivise these children, whether you like it or not.
Rory wants to say something.
I would just thinking about the siblings and the state of mind, and I would encourage everyone to hypothesize every sort of emotion and thought that they're having, all the way from confusion probably to envy about the pizzas and all that sort of stuff if they're not part of it, missing, and anger and some sense of guilt because why wasn't it me, or these things in the mix. But whatever age they are, no young person, and probably of your child's age, has the emotional sophistication to sort through that, because we're sitting here, hypothesizing they can't do it. So if you've got a hypothesis about what's going on for the sibling or for your child with Duchenne, I think just openly sharing it in on a day and a time where it feels appropriate, not mid meltdown, obviously, but after reflection and with something positive, and say, we wondered what was going on for you, and because we thought maybe you were feeling a bit left out, or maybe that seemed unfair. Does that sound right? And be prepared to be shot down, and that's fine. But that's what I do in a lot of the clinical work when I'm with a young person. I'm just sort of looking into the distance and frowning a bit and wondering. And actually, if somebody can name what you're feeling in life, it helps.
Funny, I was going to ask the same question, but to me, as a physio in clinic, it's not just about clinical trials, it's also about clinic visits. And we encourage parents to bring the child so that they can see what the day out looks like, that it can see its bloods, can see it's boring, that it's an echo, it's running from here to there, and that they can get an opportunity, and we'll do the assessments on them and they can feel what it's like. What worries me the greatest is I've had kids that I've known 5 or 6 years and didn't even know there was brothers or sisters because they're not mentioned. So we always ask about brothers and sisters and always ask that they have an opportunity to come with, even if it makes taking a day off school, not just about clinical trials, but for all clinic visits, that the children do see what their siblings get up to.
Marion, I actually remember bringing Laura and my middle daughter to one of Eli's appointments with you, and she was bored within about the first 2.5 minutes. Just wanted to get out. I think it's just worth bearing in mind as well your expectations as a parent going into a clinical trial, because the sad truth is that most trials do not meet their primary endpoints. So the scope for disappointment is massive. And when you're going into the study for you and your child to understand that this is a trial, it is not access to a treatment. Your child is being used to test whether or not these approaches are working. So just bear that in mind. I would encourage anyone, to explore the opportunities, but try and go in with a sort of realistic expectation. Does anyone want to add to that on the panel?
I fully agree, and one thing is that never feel guilty if you think, I don't want to take part in this trial. I always said, if it's a treatment at work, we will not give you the chance to choose. We will be very prescriptive in that. the clinical trial is your choice, because although it's a good experience, sometimes doesn't fit at that time, that trial, because the brother, the sister, something else happened, or because it's too far, and in that time you cannot take the time. There are a lot of reasons why you can't, and there is nothing wrong. And sometimes it's just, I'm not ready. And there is nothing wrong. And never feel guilty, I think.
Yeah, so basically the trial that didn't work for my son, it was deeply, obviously, upsetting for me because I thought it potentially was working, but it wasn't, and for Alex. But, you know, when you sign up to a trial, you do go through so much information, and it's really lovely, and you speak to them as a, you know, as a child and explain it, and that's really lovely, and you can go away and then, you know, go out for pizza again and have a chat about it before ever signing up to anything. You've got to make sure that both of you are ready for it, and, like, you know, they don't always work. That's true.
Maybe if I can just say, everybody is different, and in a way, you have to. Well, you've been lucky to be. You've been. It's probably not working for M, and I think that my presentation was stressing all the things that you really need to understand before you start. I always find that if I know where I've been driven, that I'm fine. I become distressed when I do not know exactly where, you know, my bus or my taxi is going. So having information, you know, I made the example of having information regarding the possibility to get home infusion for some of the trial, for example. That does make life, may not be nice for people who want to skip school, but they probably still stay home. But I think have as much information, because different, I think Alex mentioned there may be financial implication. I think you want to understand, you don't want to get too stressed, but you know, if you know at the beginning what you're going to embark, and that is right for you, that I think is, I certainly would recommend, and I think we also have many families that are looked after by a very dedicated team, but I think it can be a lot of commitment, especially if this is very far from where you live. So I think you need to understand it and ask as many questions as you want. Do not go to ask questions if invited to clinical trial, but just ask all the questions that you heard. And any more that will come to you because perhaps you know your family particularly well.
Shall I? I'll stand up, but I'll come around this side. No, just really echoing what you're saying about the clinical trials, actually. Our son is on a clinical trial with Michaela's team, really good, thank you, and really supportive, actually. And Oscar is just kind of really happy to be there, which is kind of, for us, really happy he's happy to be there. I think it's key that you kind of open and honest and actually kind of explain to your child, if you're going to do that, exactly kind of, don't cry, exactly what they're actually going to go through, because they're going to need to sort of sign, he signed the assent form, didn't he? And we had to sort of explain at the age of 7, kind of what actually is involved in the trial, including open muscle biopsy, which, if I'm honest, kind of put us off the most. It's one of the things you think, you're going to cut a bit of muscle out of his arm and take it away. But actually, without doing that, we wouldn't have access to the trial. And yes, we've got to go through it a second time, in about, May time. But, it will hopefully make a change, hopefully benefit all of us, and him as well. And I'd just say, it's a real opportunity, a real chance. Thank you.
Go on. I've got a question for Francesco. So, a lot of when I think it was Sarepta's gene therapy trial failed to meet its primary endpoint, a lot of parents asked me, is this the end of gene therapy? And I just wondered, I know you talked about this in your presentation, and I think the answer I gave to parents was, it's too soon to say. This was a readout at 12 months, and then I saw the pipeline of clinical trials coming up, and a lot of them are going to be reading out at the 1-year time point. And I'm just wondering, are we designing clinical trials wrong? Should we be more realistic and waiting a little bit longer before giving the readouts? I know patient wants quick readouts, but if we sometimes give a little bit longer, we're seeing the results, like with Givinostat. If we'd have read out at 12 months, but by 18 months, we saw the separation.
So I completely agree, and it clearly shows that despite my involvement with some of the companies, they never listened to me, because this is certainly, for a variety of reasons, my suggestion, both because, as you can expect, I have a deep affection for what dystrophin does, and therefore, what are the expectations in terms of the biology? That is important to build up in your model of potential response. I think that to some extent, however, maybe it's useful to discuss this, and whether it's true or not, I do not know, but often sponsors come back to say, well, the pressure from families and regulators to have short clinical trial, not have the placebo, and so on and so forth, that's also significant pressure. So I often say to the sponsor, well, if you want people like me to discuss with advocacy group why a one-year clinical trial may be a bad idea, not because we like long trial, but I think it's exactly what you say. Give the drug the best chance, and a 1 year is a very early readout. And whenever I can, and some of the sponsors will be here, I try to make the point. This is what dystrophin does, and dystrophin is not, is not a muscle-enhancing drug. Dystrophin is not a booster to, we in this room, in this, in this row of colleagues of people, we may differ of the level of dystrophin by maybe half. Well, we were discussing with Annemiek earlier on, maybe 1.5, 2 times. But it's not because I run faster and so on. We are just a bit different. So I think to expect that putting dystrophin at moderate or even medium-high level will change dramatically things in a year is against what dystrophin does biologically. And I think longer trial will be better. I completely agree.
Hi. Sorry. My son's on an exon skipping trial, again in Newcastle, and I echo all the brilliant things about the Newcastle team, that has been said today. But going back to the presentation on the antisense earlier, and all the different sort of exon skippings that are out there at the moment in research, and all the pharmaceutical companies that are kind of jumping on the opportunity to kind of like to deliver that treatment, but then change it in their little ways, and however they're doing it, they've all got little different ways of delivering this exon skipping. My question is kind of twofold, really, is that there's loads of competition there, I suppose, between the pharmaceutical companies. Are we expecting that to kind of dwindle down now in terms of, are we going to see a one sort of treatment that is going to be better, and or are we going to continue seeing a lot of research ongoing over the next couple of years in this area where they keep trying to kind of outdo each other, I suppose, in terms of, the best dystrophin expression or the best mobility or whatever it is. But then the second question then is, we talked a lot about like the challenges with NICE and getting things over the line, and exon skipping is not approved in the UK, so how will that kind of be decided by NICE? Is it going to be first to the market wins, or are we going to wait for all of these trials to be finished and then decide which one of those trials or pharmaceutical companies has the best sort of outcome?
Maybe I can start, and then maybe Michael or somebody else will maybe wish to continue. So the question, one could see the multiple. I tell you what I think, then maybe other people have different opinion. I'll start by saying when I started many years ago, and Annemiek will be remembering this, in this room, or the equivalent of this room now, many, many years ago, we were not criticized, but the question was why 2 companies that was at the time wasn't even called Sarepta, was called AVI Biopharma. The other was Prosensa and so on and so forth, why you're competing and you are doing two things in parallel. It's the same thing, it's exon skipping. And I think, unfortunately for Prosensa at the time, that particular trial, in actual fact, it's not that it didn't work, but I think the drug was probably not completely safe in terms of, they had a number of adverse events, and it became clear it was not a drug that you could give it. And had it been all the eggs in that basket, I think that would have had a lot of consequences. I suppose that while all the companies, and maybe I trivialize what you're doing, and when I say they're tweaking, they're putting some peptide, there are differences in what they're doing. These differences are fundamental difference of the biology. There are multiple ways people could do things. So I think will be, from a scientific perspective, I think will be fantastic to really understand which one of these better target skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, better avoids kidney toxicity, blah, 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 blah. I think it's not an obvious question or obvious result at this point in time. So I'm generally glad that there are multiple, in inverted comma, competing, but at the same time giving more opportunities to be exposed in clinical trial to many more people. So I only see benefit from that. Regarding the second point, regarding the surrogate of dystrophin, I think that in a way, one question, we are potentially now that we are not under the EMA rules, potentially MHRA is not nice, but MHRA could take a different view. So I think that this is an area where I think we should engage with MHRA to understand whether they are more FDA aligned or whether they are more EMA aligned. I think that question should really put to MHRA. So I think is a crucial question. And there are pros and cons. I'm not saying FDA is fantastic and EMA is rubbish or vice versa, but I think it would be nice. I mean, the MHRA, I have to say, every time I've been involved with MHRA, I've been impressed by the rigor and this knowledge. So I really would like to know what they think, but I think we should, and the sponsor should put that question to them.
Thank you, Francesco. Does anybody else on the panel want to say something? Because I just want to send a microphone to the back. The woman who is standing up now, I just think we should give her a round of applause because her name is Fleur Chandler and she is the amazing person who created Project Hercules. I didn't even know she was coming today, hence why she's not on the panel, but over to you, Fleur.
Oh, thanks, Emily. No, it's lovely to be here. I'm sorry I only managed the last half an hour or so. Well, no, actually the last half afternoon, but thank you. I was just going to pick up on the question about what NICE would do with these medicines. So my day job is looking after medicines that go through NICE, so we're sort of quite aware of the process. So I think what's important to understand is that you have both regulatory and then reimbursement processes going on, and they're all quite regulated in terms of how the times work. So the question was, would NICE wait and see if they looked at everything in one place to decide which one was the best to offer? Probably not, because they all go in sequence. So as your medicine comes through through its clinical trials, it goes into the regulatory process. That's likely to be MHRA in the UK. And then the NICE process, which is about the reimbursement, whether it's valuable or not, that triggers at a certain time point. So unless there's medicines coming together that actually overlap in those time points, NICE will look at them individually. So, and then the guidance that you will get will be around the clinical and cost effectiveness of that medicine. So that will be on its own. And then the next one that comes along will be probably compared to that one. So the sort of guidance that you might get once you've got 2 or 3 of these coming through will be these medicines, these work in this patients, these work in these patients, and quite often it says something like use the cheapest option. But then also you will never see what the actual prices are. What you see out in the papers in terms of the prices of the medicines is not what the NHS will be paying for them. So that's all sort of managed between the company and NHS England. So I hope that answered the question. So it's just in terms of process, everything will happen in sequence, and it's down to the companies to have that engagement. but really ably supported by the clinicians and the patient organisations.
Yeah. Thank you, Fleur.
Thank you. Question to a broad audience, Rory, I think, and to the mums and maybe the larger community for the, in terms of the psychological benefit and impact on the children, would you advocate or do you see the benefit of the boys themselves getting together or sort of like speaking to other kids with Duchenne, and have you ever facilitated that, or even asking the community, does something like that happen, and would it benefit the children, and at what ages do you think? Because I imagine a bunch of 4-year-olds getting together is probably not going to be beneficial, but I don't know. At what stage?
You guys know much more about this than me, but it's come up in some of the conversation. I mean, I've sort of suggested it to a few families that I've spoken to, and thinking about what are the barriers to that. And I think some of the fear probably for some families is, what if we introduce ourselves to another family where the disease is more progressed, and then my son comes away thinking this is going to be awful for me. So that's one potential aspect of it, isn't it? But I think it probably is a good thing to feel connected to someone else who's having some similar dilemmas and life experiences. A parallel recently, not about Duchenne, but there's a rare condition called autoimmune encephalitis, and I had 2 patients in CAMS who had it in the space of a couple of months. Adolescent girls who developed psychosis almost overnight, and their autoimmune system was attacking their brain, and they were very, very ill. Both made quite a good recovery, but actually asked the families did they want to be linked up, and it worked very well. And they were relieved to hear that someone else had had this really bizarre life experience.
Yes, I mean, I do think it's really beneficial to have the boys together. I think Felix has been quite lucky from being young. He's known Jack, Alex's son, and some other families who live quite close by, and he definitely he will say to his twin brother, well, I'm going to go and speak to my friends now. And, you know, he feels very protective of, you know, their mind, because it's much, much easier for Herbie to go off and, you know, go out with everyone from school. So, and I also think Felix is in a chair now all the time. So, you know, having other families who have a house that you can actually get into is massive. You know, because most of his other friends round and about, we can't really get in. So that again, and you know, I suppose it depends where you live and things like that. What our local hospice actually also does facilitate some meetups with some of the boys. We haven't actually been yet, but I know Alex knows a little bit more about that. And so that sometimes can be a really positive thing for them to find other friends or other families who live roundabout close to you.
I think hospices can... When Jack was 4 or 5, I was a bit reluctant. I didn't really want to take him to a hospice, but I went to actually access hydrotherapy initially, and then sort of over time gained the other services. And they run a boys out club that lots of the boys go to and meet up, and they order a takeaway and stay overnight. And Jack actually, he loves it. And they're actually brilliant for sibling support as well. So, you know, if you can take that step, they do things. It is something we have considered at Duchenne UK of whether we should do more events for boys. We're not doing it at the moment. It is a funding issue. So, you know, it's something we would consider, but we would have to specifically fundraise for that if we were to do it.
Yeah, again, hospices, my son's had overnight stays there, and they're not sad places, they're amazing places, and it's not about cancer and death, and it's just, you know, a great place. My son is still ambulant, so for him, he's a teenager, he's got his own mind. He has met other children through the clinical trials mainly, that have got Duchenne, but his choice has been, I've got my friends locally, I'm good, I'm fine. Although he has connected with other children that have got Duchenne online through gaming. And also there's social media and things like that where they can connect, which is good. But Alex has got a really good friend locally that's got Becker's, and he's 33. And actually, my son really looks up to him because he sees he's living life despite being in a chair, despite having Becker's. And my son just sees that as real comfort because he can speak to him at the same sort of level. And ask him, you know, questions like, what's it like going on holiday with a chair, and what chair would you recommend? And so for me, it's not just about meeting others with Duchenne, but other conditions or locally. But yeah, I think you have to be driven by your child as well and what they want. We've always asked Alex, what does he want to do? But yeah, just another perspective on it.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi, this question is for John. Looks surprised. Is there any guidance out there for heart consultants on the possibility of increasing prednisolone, say, for adults, and also the prescribing of beta blockers to adults who haven't had a deterioration shown on their MRI or on their echo, who have got a heart rate of over 100?
Yeah, two good points. The issue of steroids is heavily coloured, as Michaela has explained, by the toxicity element in terms of bone deterioration. So we don't have any evidence that boosting the steroid dosage, as you get into adulthood and heavier, that going up in line with your weight adds any extra benefit.
Sorry, I said the wrong drug there. I meant perindopril.
Oh, perindopril, yes. It's always been advised with ACE inhibitors across the board for any cardiac condition requiring ACE inhibitors that you optimize the dose for size, weight, and age. So the top dose for perindopril is 8. If you're an adult or an adolescent of 70 kilograms, then that's the dose you should be on unless it's impairing renal function or causing excessive blood pressure lowering. It doesn't have to be perindopril. Remember, we shouldn't be fixated on that drug. That's the one that had first evidence going for it. But we believe that the ACE inhibitor benefit is generic. So therefore, it could be lisinopril, it could be ramipril, whichever one your cardiologist favors. And we don't think there's any difference between them. It may make a difference in terms of how many times a day you have to take it, which may have a colouring on which one you go for. In terms of beta blockers, there's no evidence that beta blockers actually improve prognosis at the prophylactic stage, but it is intriguing that the resting heart rate in boys with Duchenne dystrophy is way, way higher than their peers without the condition. And if you think about it, that it's the normal day-to-day heart beating that's actually causing the damage in the heart. Beta blockers do two things. They actually slow down heart rate, therefore you're beating less often. Theoretically, therefore, your heart is not as called upon to beat as often as it would otherwise. And the second thing is it reduces the force of contraction, which therefore also reduces the tension theoretically in the myocardium. But this is all theoretical. If you say to me, where are the papers showing a prognostic benefit from a beta blocker at a prophylactic stage, then we don't have that data. But there's very good data on the need for beta blockers as your heart begins to deteriorate and you've got underperformance in heart pumping function. So that's really once you're getting into the teens and beyond.
And the reason I'm asking, my son is 32. He's still on 4 milligrams of perindopril.
Is he very thin?
No. But he's not obese. He's chunky.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and is there some reluctance, or is there you do sometimes find that there's low blood pressure and that you try to put up the dose and you have to back away. But one of the nice things about going from, say, 4 to 6 is that there isn't a 6 milligram tablet, so you can add a 2 milligram to a 4, and if you don't like it, you just stop it. And it's a kind of a stepping stone to the 8. If you tolerated 6 and there was no problem, then you're more confident, if your weight is appropriate and your age is appropriate, to go to 8. But any increase in ACE inhibitors ideally does require a blood test to check your kidney function afterwards. And the other point about ACE inhibitors is that, and the whole plethora of cardiac drugs, is that if you become seriously unwell and that illness is leading to aggravating low blood pressure, then you may have to pull away the treatment to preserve the kidneys until recovery is underway and then put them back in place.
I think we're going to have to end it there. I'm determined to finish at 5, which gives 3 minutes to sum up. So thank you very much to our panellists.